Anyway. Okay. So, we're going to start looking at what the church teaches. This answer, as with most things that we've been talking about, I just talked to the freshmen today about evolution and Darwin and all that stuff that we did last semester. Okay? The answer is not, well, hi, I'm Dave, I'm with the church, here are the answers, here's the reasons why, thank you. Okay? That's why classes are long. Okay? Now, you probably are saying too long, but that's your opinion, that's fine. But we need time to look at this stuff. Okay? It's not like, oh, well, there's the one answer, and then that's it, and you have to go home. Okay? There's a lot to it, so we're going to unpack it. This first thing on your handout, okay, we're going to read through this together. This is, up here, the name of this document is Ordinatio Sacerdotalis. Okay, that is a document that John Paul II wrote in 1993. All right. Most papal documents, and I forgot to bring them down. I have all of John Paul II's papal documents in 4 different books. Okay, some of them are called apostolic constitutions, apostolic exhortations, encyclicals, blah blah blah. Okay, most of them are like 100 pages each. Okay, most of them are 100 pages or so. This one is 4 pages. 4 pages. That's it. Okay? 4 pages, and that's important, and that has significance. Okay? Now, let's read through this. This is the very end of the letter about ordination of women to the priesthood from John Paul II. Okay? Can someone read that for us at the top of the page? Amber.
Wherefore, in order that all doubt may be removed regarding a matter of great importance, a matter which pertains to the Church's divine constitution itself, in virtue of my ministry of confirming the brethren, I declare that the Church has no authority whatsoever to confer priestly ordination on women, and that this judgment is to be definitively held by all the Church's faithful.
All right? That's it. That's the very end of it. And the thing that it's important to realize is it's short for a reason. Okay? It's short for a reason. And he says in there basically this, and that's what I have down here on your handout. The one single solo fundamental reason the Church doesn't ordain women is this. Jesus chose 12 men. Jesus chose 12 men to be apostles. Everything is capital letters. The one single solo fundamental reason the Church doesn't ordain women is because Jesus chose 12 men to be His apostles. Okay, that is the fundamental reason. And he says in there very quickly, the Church does not have the authority to deviate from that. So it's not like, oh, well, there's these, there's 900 reasons. No. Okay, that's not what he says in there at all. He says it's very simple. That's what Jesus did, and the Church doesn't have the authority to do differently. Now, then, what we have in this debate that you're going to find when if you are interested in it or whatever, you go to some other, you read other things or whatnot, you have the fundamental reason, which we just wrote. Jesus chose 12 men. We have the fundamental reason. And then we have a bunch of theological arguments about it. Okay? We have a bunch of theological arguments about why Jesus may have done that. Why He may have done that. Okay? But it's important to understand that these theological arguments that people have put forward through the centuries about why Jesus may have done that is not the same as the fundamental reason. What happens all the time is this. People want to engage those theological things that we're going to look at. We're going to look at these right now. Okay? These theological arguments, people's guesses or theologians' guesses as to why Jesus did that. People always want to fight those. Oh, that's stupid. That's a stupid reason that Jesus would have done that. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, well, if you don't like it, then that's your opinion or whatever. Okay? But you're not actually arguing. No one argues with this. Jesus only chose men to be apostles. Okay? No one argues with that. This is not ever fought over. What is fought over is this. People's guesses, and even the church's guesses, or best guesses, as to why Jesus may have done that. Is that distinction clear? Because we're going to say some reasons why Jesus may have only chosen men. But some people will say, well, I don't like that reason. If you do, then whatever, okay? But you're still having, no one is disputing that. Okay, so let's look at, people often attack the theories that the church has put forward as to why Christ chose only men, but no one can deny that He chose only men. A lot of the stuff that we're looking at today is actually compiled by a woman named Sister Sarah Butler. If you're ever, write her name somewhere down there. I know you don't care now, but you might someday down the road pull this back out. Sarah Butler, up there. Okay? She used to be in favor of ordaining women to the Catholic priesthood. Okay? And then she started to really kind of get into theology and became, and is now kind of the preeminent, she wrote a book on this topic that does a nice job of pulling it all together. So if you're ever down the road and you're wanting to get all of this from a source, I pulled a lot of this stuff in here from Sister Sarah Butler's book, Ordaining, I can't remember the title of it, on reserving ordination to men alone or something like that. Okay? But anyway, it's a nice quote. Okay? So we're going to have people, we're going to throw out some theories today that are attempts to explain this, but they still don't change the fact that Jesus did this. Okay? All right. The church, she changed her view. Okay? She changed her view and then decided, she realized that basically that her view was wrong as a sister and as a person, as a theologian. So she changed her view on the teaching and now is one of the leading people advocating the church's position on it. If that makes sense. Okay? All right. So again, the church says it's simple. We don't have the authority to change the teaching of Christ. Neither did the apostles or anyone in the early church. Okay? Again, we've talked about this before. Okay? Let's look at the three main arguments, first of all, against the church that people make. Okay? Because I think that's important. You always say, or some of you will often say, that I don't give you the other side. Okay? I do, but I just don't think we call attention to it. Right now, what I'm starting with is the other side. Okay? We're starting looking at what the people say against the church. Okay? The first objection, and you write that one in, the church denies women equal opportunity and rights based on a stereotype that is outdated. However you want to phrase that. You don't have to write it down word for word. But the church denies women an equal opportunity and rights based on a stereotype that is outdated. Right? That was kind of what somebody was saying. They should be able, equal rights. I think somebody was saying that earlier.
What is the outdated stereotype?
That whatever, women are inferior to men, or that kind of a stereotype of women that is no longer held today, right?
Has the church always been like an equal opportunity employer?
What do you mean with regards to ordination?
Like anything within like any position within the church?
Just like women in general.
Not women, like not just women in general, like different races.
Yeah.
Has the church always been like that? Like always allowed anybody?
I'm not really sure, like, where, come in where?
Like to be priests or brothers, sisters, working in parishes, stuff like that.
Yeah. Are you thinking of a time where they didn't? I'm not exactly
I'm
sure.
just asking. I'm just asking.
Have they always been equal opportunity? Well, I mean, equal opportunity, that was a law or an idea that.
Church always let black people and white people work together. And
That's what I'm asking. Just what are you trying to say?
didn't work.
Yeah. I mean, the church. There's been.
Was there a time when they wouldn't let in a certain ethnic group to work in the church?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of.
I'm not arguing.
Yeah, no, I seriously, I'm not aware of any time where the church has said these certain people, these group of people that are men cannot be priests. If that's what you're asking? Okay, yeah. I think basically the role of lay people working in the church started in our country about the same time as the equal opportunity did. And so in that sense, it would be, yes, the church has been following the laws of equal opportunity since that's been a law in our country, I would say, yeah. With regards to, are you talking about parish secretaries and that kind of stuff? Okay. All right. Now, so reply number one to that argument, or to that end, would be this. No one, men included, has a right to be ordained. That's what the church would respond to objection one by saying. No one, men included, has a right to be ordained. Who decides what men to ordain? The bishop. The bishop. The bishop decides what men to ordain. Can I show up at the bishop's door and say, since I'm a man, you must ordain me? I mean, I can, but he's going to say, yeah, and you're crazy. Okay? How many years did I have to spend in the seminary? 6 years after college. Okay? And at any point in that period, the bishop could come and say, hey, thanks for trying, but I'm not going to ordain you. That would. I don't know. I would probably go out and get married. Or would have gone out. No. But yeah, that's what it is. So we often think of, it's viewed a lot of times, ordination is viewed as this thing that women have to win. Because it's the symbol of rights. It's a right that the church is denying women. But the thing that's important to realize is that men do not have a right to be ordained either. So talking about this as a rights issue doesn't make any sense, really. Okay? In that sense. In the sense that men do not have a right to be ordained either. Okay? Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Okay? Another thing to say in regards to this, and this is very important. The priesthood has nothing to do, and this is going to take some explanation, but it's important to understand that as well. The priesthood has nothing to do with holiness. And this is a very good discussion for us to have. Okay? Are there priests out there who have done the most heinous thing imaginable? Yes. Priests have sinned. Can you guys see this? Priests have sinned in the worst ways. Because here's what it's viewed a lot of times as, if that person could become a priest, that would make them holy. That would make them get to heaven. So you're denying, it's a lot of times thought of as, the church is denying women a way to become holier. Does that make sense? Do you understand that? And people view that. And that's the crazy thing about it. Even people who don't like the priesthood or maybe aren't even Catholic assume if they see this outfit, they ascribe to me before having ever met me, most of the time, a sense that I am holier than the average person. Does that make sense? Okay? I do that when I see other priests. I assume that they are holier than the average person. Is that based on reality? No. It's not. Somebody can wear this and can do the most heinous things imaginable. Now, the priesthood is related to holiness only in the sense that if God calls me and I say yes, then I'm doing what God asks, and that can make me holier, and that can help my holiness. I'll be down here in just a second. Okay? Alright. Priesthood only impacts my holiness in the sense that if God calls me to it and I say yes, that can help me do what God asks me to do. Does that make sense? But I could, in the same way that if God is calling someone to be a teacher, that role of teacher can help them become better people. Luis? Do you need to stand? I know it's tiring. We just ate. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay? Priesthood is not, it's not what that we're saying, well, sorry ladies, only men have the right to become holier through the priesthood. There's nothing that I can do to stop people from seeing it as me being holier. I can't other than tell people, look, it doesn't have anything, I'm not, because I'm a priest, I am called, God calls me, or calls priests, for the church. Priesthood is service for the church. It is not like some kind of, in a video game or something like that, where you get like this power-up thing and all of a sudden now you glow, right? Like Mario Brothers or whatever, you eat the flower and now you have firepower. You can throw fireballs. It's not like that. It's not like that. Okay? The priesthood is service for the church. It's a vocation. It's a calling. And if God calls me to it, then I will grow holier by pursuing it. But it's not something that I was no holier on the day of my ordination than I was the day before. Did my soul change? Yes. Did I go through, did my soul completely change? Yes. Did I become a new person in the priesthood? Yes. Did that necessarily make me holier? You're right, Sam, it did not. Adamant. And Sam knows. It's like you know that I was a bad person or something. Definitely did not. That distinction is very important. Okay? It's very, 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 very important. Comments on that, or thoughts, questions, concerns so far? All right. Okay. Now, the other thing about the church and women and equal opportunity and this stereotype issue. Wow. A little flyover. Never too early to practice. They've been flying over all week? Okay. Well, actually, let's come back to that. What's that? Okay, let's talk about that one. It's often assumed what is the main reason that people put forward as to why Jesus would not have chosen a woman at the time? Why would Jesus maybe have not chosen any women at the time of the apostles? They were considered inferior. It's clear that Sam is fired up. What's that? No, you could. There were certain instances, just as with men, women and men could make themselves impure. But you could also then go to the temple, offer sacrifices, and purify yourself again, men and women. All right. So basically, they were considered inferior. What else? Any other? So what's the argument? Well, who cares if they're inferior? Why would that matter? Why would Jesus not make them apostles if they were inferior? Come on. What's the argument? Or whatever.
I think that it was already planned that the roles were going to be taken by men, and he chose a collective group of men because, I don't know, maybe they're all the same, so it would have been easier to figure out how they were all supposed to fulfill their jobs because they didn't have to worry about the differentiation between, well, the woman's going to do it this way and the man's going to want to do it that way.
Okay. Put yourself in the shoes of people who are in favor of women's. I'm shocked actually that more of you aren't. That more of you don't think women should be ordained, but that's fine. Put yourself in the shoes of those who would want women to be ordained priests. Why? What would they be arguing about why Jesus only chose men at that time? Because they're inferior. What else, though? There's more to it than that. People then would listen to men more back then in those days. Right? So what's the role of the apostles going to be? The apostles are going to go out and do what? Preach, spread the news, and people are going to listen to men more, right? Basically, the idea, and I'm surprised that more of you don't know this, but we'll go with it. Okay, Jesus was afraid of the culture. Yeah. The main argument basically for women's ordination is this, that Jesus was afraid of the way the culture viewed women at the time, so he didn't make any women apostles. Right? Because if the apostles are going to go out and preach and spread the good news of Jesus, then people aren't going to listen to women. Okay? And in fact, the argument is made that a woman's testimony was not accepted in court back then, so a woman could not have been an apostle and an effective spreader of the good news. Okay, have you guys heard that before? If you didn't, see now I'm giving you the other side. Okay, so don't go running around saying I'm not. All right, but anyway.
Are other costs very controversial?
Usually, you guys usually are too, but I think everyone's just. I think maybe thrown in the towel on the year. Yeah. You got knocked out? Yeah. I know. What decision? There's a lot of people that believe that they can change the church, though, on it.
But today, literally, Jesus chose 12 men, and the church has no authority to make the difference.
Right. Some people say that the church... Yes, I agree with you that it sounds settled, but people think that, well, John Paul II or whoever, the church is still outdated and we're going to change the church. Alicia?
Not true. Oh, so the church's belief is, like, my aunt was a nun.
Okay.
She was in for lots of years.
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
I'm sure that she did mass sometimes. I don't know, because they never got a priest.
Did she say she did Mass?
I think so.
Okay.
But anyway,
So your aunt's a nun and she said Mass.
does the church believe that, like, she's content to tell them?
Well, you don't know if she said Mass, right? For sure?
For sure, I don't know.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about it then.
But I'm just asking. Like, if
The church would say that yes, to impersonate a priest and say Mass if you're not ordained it would be a mortal sin. But what happens anytime you commit a mortal sin? What can you do? You can go to confession. So the church doesn't say, if you do this, then you're going to burn in hell. Yes, Rachel?
Okay, so again, this is the Catholic Church. So what does the Catholic Church think about, like, the Protestants, right?
Okay.
Because at my church, we've had women that are ministers speak for, like, our Women's Day, stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
They're actual ministers.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
how do they feel about that?
Okay, good question. And I think, so with Protestant ministers, all Protestant denominations accept female ministers, right? Basically what we have going on there is that Protestant denominations do not think of the priesthood in the same way as Catholics. So basically the way Protestant denominations view ministry, it would make sense to have male and female, because they don't see the ministers going back to being representatives of the apostles in a very direct way, like the church does. The church says priesthood goes back to the apostles, laying on of hands all the way through to today, and that the priest represents, in a way, the apostles' ministry. So with Protestants, it almost does make sense that men and women because of the way they view the priesthood. Yes.
I think one reason why so many of these arguments arise is because in today's world, there's kind of like a liberal trend where everyone thinks, everyone should be able to do everything.
Right.
And then when that gets denied because there's like a fundamental tradition and law of doing something, people just get upset that, people don't want to change for them.
Yeah.
People don't want to just say, oh, okay, since you are allowed to do this, we're going to allow you to do that too, because you want to be allowed to do everything.
Right.
And it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. No. Yes. That is the issue that we face today, for sure. With that. Okay. Back to this issue really quickly. Let's finish this up at least before we take a break. The idea that Jesus was afraid of the culture with regard to women, he feared. This idea is out there that Jesus was afraid that if he ordained women, he would be thought as crazy, if he would have made women apostles. Okay? Can anybody think how the church responds to that, or would respond to that? Jesus, if you read the Gospels, Jesus at every turn upsets the established order. He is, in every sense of the word, rebellious. There is nothing. What is the most sacred teaching of the Jews, perhaps, that Jesus violates all the time? What is one of the most sacred things that the Jewish people held on to that Jesus was always violating in their mind? Working on the Sabbath. Okay? The Sabbath day was considered extremely holy. Jesus is always doing what to them? He's doing what they would consider work. He's upsetting the established order. Okay? His best friends, some of his closest people, were women. Right? So to say that Jesus was afraid of these cultural things, I think, doesn't really jive with the Jesus that you encounter in the Gospels. That's what the church would say in response to that. Okay? We good on that?
Wait, so it's not a single work on Sunday?
No, the whole issue of Sunday is probably a little bit different, but what Jesus was doing, at least we know, was not actually work. He was healing people. The Jews just misunderstood it as violating the Sabbath. But he nonetheless, he knew before he did that the Jews were going to view him as violating their most precious rule. And yet, he didn't care. He still did it, right?
Little conscience or question saying it says we work on Sunday.
Yes. Yes, that is a problem in the mind of the church. To do work on Sunday is a problem, is a sin in the mind of the church. If it's unnecessary. There are doctors and nurses, things like that, people who run the power. I mean, obviously there's certain jobs that are necessary. But like I've stopped going to grocery stores and doing things on Sunday that are not necessary. Just because I don't want to fuel the economy, people working on Sundays that don't have to be. Roger. Just resting. Excellent. I almost ran out of food. I basically ran out of food yesterday because I didn't go to the store on Saturday. But I didn't go to the store yesterday either because I didn't want to. Anyway, that's a discussion for a later day. Let's take a break. Again, we're still looking at this idea of Jesus being afraid to pick women because of cultural issues. Jesus being afraid to pick women. Some people say that because a woman's testimony was not accepted in court, Jesus would not have ordained a woman as one of the apostles. But Jesus was not putting together a legal defense team of people who are going to work through the courts. He's not trying to get a group of, like OJ's lawyers together or something like that, the top legal team in the country. Okay? Otherwise, he wouldn't have picked fishermen to be the people that were going to do the work for him. He would have gotten lawyers and people who would have been good in the courts. He knew that they were going to be working outside this court system, all those other things. So he would not have been worried, Jesus was not worried, about trying to find people whose testimony would be acceptable in court or anywhere else. Yes, one was a tax collector. Yeah.
Partially off topic, do you think he chose the people that he chose because they were fishermen? Because like when you think about a fisherman, like they don't get paid frequently, they get paid on how much they bring in, so they're persistent.
Yeah.
So like the people that he chose would have to be persistent because not a lot of people at the time were followers of what he was trying to like.
One of the things that, the things that it says in the Bible, he chose the weak to shame the strong. He chose the simple to shame the smart, the arrogant. You know, so he chose people who were the fishermen were not terribly rich. They were not terribly important people. So he chose those men specifically because of the fact that they were not court lawyers or judges or princes or anything like that. Because it would make sense if princes were successful, they continue to be successful with Jesus. He chose people who were very poor, very unsuccessful people. And the Bible says, again, he chooses these simple people to show exactly that he is the one that's winning. If that makes sense. So women would have been just as successful at that as being people who would have not been thought of as very much in the eyes of the world, but nonetheless he chooses only men. Okay? He chooses only men. This is still the first response, the church's responses. Okay? He routinely calls people to witness on his behalf and carry out tasks on his behalf with no regard for what society would have thought about those people in those roles. So he would have, if he wanted to, he could have chosen women. As in the mind of the church there. Okay? Now, objection 2, Kari. The church's decision is based on a wrong understanding of the differences between men and women. That's the argument that's made. But one thing that we can say in response to that again is that the decision wasn't one that the church makes. Christ made the decision. Okay, to accept only men as apostles. So if you're going to say that someone had a wrong understanding of the differences between men and women, you'd have to say that that was Christ, and that is kind of ridiculous if you really believe Jesus is who the church believes Jesus is. Yeah, that's the only response to that objection. That this was Christ's decision, not the church's. Again, the church says, look, it's out of our hands. All right, this is something that's beyond what we're doing. Okay, if you're asleep, you're going to have to stand up. Okay, that's in your syllabus as the punishment. Okay, we got a couple people that might need to be standing up here soon. Okay, you need to be showing me that you're writing these things down. And if you have questions or whatever. Yep. Everybody good on that? Still need it? Okay. Now, objection 3, if you can be baptized, you should be able to be ordained.
What's the one that respond?
To this?
That's the second one. Oh, that's respond.
Uh-huh.
Whoops.
So you can just separate the two. One is the response, right?
I forgot the second one.
Okay.
I'll do it later.
Okay. I can give it to you after class 2. Objection 3. Many people offer this up. Look, anybody can be baptized, so you should be able to be ordained as well, if anyone can be baptized. All right. Go back here, grab the scriptura. Baptism is a sacrament that is involved with salvation. If you're baptized, you're saved. Okay? And obviously, all people have access to salvation. This is not the same thing in the mind of the church. To be ordained a priest does not, again, does being ordained a priest have any impact? Does it mean that one person is now more likely to go to heaven than the other person who's not ordained? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We see it that way, but when we do, we see it wrongly. Now let's read 1 Corinthians 12:4. Let me find that one. Okay. This is a kind of a famous passage. There are different kinds of spiritual gifts, but the same Spirit. There are different forms of service, but the same Lord. To each individual, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for some benefit. This is important. To one is given through the Spirit wisdom. To another, knowledge according to the same Spirit. To another, faith. To another, gifts of healing. To another, mighty deeds. To another, prophecy. To another, discernment of spirits. To another, interpretation of tongues. But one and the same Spirit produces all of these, distributing them individually to each person as the Spirit wishes. The body is not a single part, but many. If a foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it does not for this reason belong any less to the body. If Jonathan Ferris's hand is mad at the foot because the hand cannot be a foot, the hand can't just say, well, I'm not a part of Jonathan anymore. Okay, it is a part of Jonathan. the hand plays a role in Jonathan just like the foot does. Different roles? Yes. More important or less important? No. Okay? You need the hand, you need the foot. Okay? It's the same thing in the sense that people do not say to themselves, well, since I don't get to play priest, that's not fair. Okay? It is a role within the body of Christ. And that passage from Corinthians is a reminder to not protest the thing that I don't get to do. Okay? It's the same way as a priest should not be running around saying, I don't get to have sex. That's not fair. I want to have children too. Okay? Well, then you don't understand the idea of your vocation. Okay? The Holy Spirit calls certain people to certain things. And we don't say, well, I don't want to do that. I want to be something different. Okay? That's what the church would say about the idea that ordination makes me holy. There's a thing on the back of your handout if you want to turn the page over. I think it says, what's the one quote to remember? This is an important quote. This is John Paul II quotes this in that letter, Ordinatio Sacerdotalis, that we looked at the beginning. This quote is from there. And it's elsewhere too. It is not the ministers who are the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. It is the saints. It is not the ministers who are the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. It is the saints. I learned in 6 years in the seminary a lot of theology. I learned Latin. Okay? I've read the Bible, the whole thing. I've read the entire thing at least once. The New Testament I've probably read 30 times. I've read almost the whole catechism, most of canon law. Okay? All that stuff. I know a lot about God and about the church and about theology. That doesn't get me one step closer to heaven. There are saints who never knew how to read. There are saints who maybe I'm sure there's been saints who've been unable to speak or read or whatever. Any kind of thing that you can imagine. Some of them, there's a Saint Maria Goretti, died at the age of 12, was martyred because she wouldn't give up a man was saying, have sex with me. She said, no, I refuse to do that. He said, well, I'm going to kill you. And she died instead of giving up her virginity. Does she know? I don't know. She probably didn't know Latin. She probably never read the whole Bible. She probably doesn't know half the things that I've learned about theology. She's a saint, though. And I'm not. I may be someday. We never know. Right? We hope. We try. But I'm definitely not right now. You never know, till the whole thing's done. Okay? It isn't. The ministers are not the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. That's the main point that I hope that you understand when you do this. Okay? It's not the ministers, it's the saints. And learning about God is great, and it can bring you closer to God, but it doesn't necessarily bring you closer to God. For me personally, learning those things, I don't mean to say that it was a waste of my time to do any of that. To look at the catechism, to read the Bible. I don't mean that. That's been good for me. But it doesn't necessarily make me a saint. Some of the great sinners of all time knew way more than I did. Way more than I do. Yet you can know a lot about God, but not know God. Okay?
And this is a little off topic, but are they in the process of canonizing Pope John Paul II?
Once you become beatified, or you become a blessed, which is like a JV saint, basically. Okay? We're like, yeah, he's had some miracles. Then there's another process that you have to start to decide if you're canonized a saint. So he's in that process now. Once you become beatified, you can start working on varsity. Okay?
Has he, like, does he have miracles or healings like that he was saying?
Uh-huh.
Do you know what they are?
But see, what happens is once you become beatified, I'm not exactly sure which ones they are, but I mean, you have to have, you can't get beatified if you haven't had miracles attributed to you. Once you get beatified, they start over again. And there has to be new miracles since you've been beatified.
So, like, people praying to you and then things magically happen, basically.
Yes.
Like interceding.
Yes. But it has to be since. So if you had like 900 miracles before you were beatified, you have to have more. You're starting over again.
You're starting your batting average all over.
Exactly. It's a new season. Your batting average is a new season as a saint or as a beatified person. Okay? Any other questions, relevant or not, to what we've been talking about? Good. All right. You guys are ending with a bang. Pope Benedict has this to say, kind of what we've been talking about. Pope Benedict on power. If I see the church only under the aspect of power, then it follows that everyone who doesn't hold an office is ipso facto oppressed. Okay? If you think that becoming a priest is about gaining power, and then that women are denied that power, then you think that everyone is oppressed. He also says anyone who turns to the question of power has utterly missed the mystery of the church. If you think that this is about power, then you don't get it. And some priests think this is about power, and they don't get it. Okay, I'm not just saying it's other people that don't get it. There are Catholics who think it's about power. And there are priests that think it's about power. But they've missed the point. They've missed the entire point. Okay? Christ said, I come to serve, not to be served. I come to serve, not to be served. If you are, as a priest, coming to be served, if you expect to be served, then you have issues. You have serious problems. Kayla, Kari, Eric, Tyler, you guys need to stand up. Mm-hmm. Got it. I didn't say anything. Okay. The main theological argument is the idea that Christ only ordained men as apostles. Okay? We're now going to look. You don't need anything on there. Let me see what you have on here. Oh, okay. What is the main theological argument that most have put forward in the church as a possible reason why Christ chose only men? The main reason is this. The priest stands, we talked about this already, in persona Christi, in the person of Christ. If you want to write that in, that's fine. The priest stands in the person of Christ. This is the main argument that people put forward for why the church has only traditionally chosen men. Okay? What's that? That's a theological argument. That's, again, remember, that's people's best guess as to why Christ did what he did, right? It's not the fundamental, main, sole reason. Okay? When does the priest stand in persona Christi? At Mass, in the sacraments. Okay? Only in the sacraments does he stand in the person of Christ. Amber.
I find it kind of comical that people, I guess, in the world question this, because if they disagree with it and think that women should be priests, it just basically proves their ignorance because they don't know this. I don't think they've taken the time to understand how it is.
I'll let you say that.
It should be like that.
I'll let you say that.
In different religions, like where I mean, you know what I'm saying? If you
No, yeah.
hear one way,
Right.
you learn about God here.
Right.
Why can't you like that there?
I think, yes, and I think you're saying the same thing. You're saying but people don't know this, so that's why. Because they, and again, it's what Rachel was asking and what Kayla's saying too. If you don't have this understanding of what a priest is and what a priest is supposed to be doing, then it doesn't make a lot of sense to keep that as, if you don't see priesthood as coming from the apostles, which is what the church says, then it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to keep that tradition going. Okay? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if they're just ministers, well, yes, of course, women can read the scriptures just as well as men can, and can come up with things to talk about. You know, you watch the women on TV, they do the Protestant, services and so forth. They have great stuff, just as good as any of the guys, right? Yeah. So you're exactly. Yeah, I think you're both saying the same thing. I think the reason that people, even Catholics, how many Catholics know what a priest really is supposed to be doing? Not many. Okay, not many understand that this is what the church believes is happening. And so that, yes, I think you're saying the same thing. The problem is kind of education or knowing that. So that's why the camera's in the back of the room. Okay, trying to get it out there. Okay. So the priest stands in the mind of the church. Okay, in the mind of the church, the priest is standing as a window to Christ. The priest is standing in the person of Christ. You're supposed to see Christ through the priest in the sacraments. Okay? Which is why when I celebrate Mass, I try to be invisible. I try to not draw attention to myself. And I think we've talked about this before. Okay? Because if I'm standing in the person of Christ and I'm like, hey, everybody, I'm a cool guy, I got funny jokes. Right? Did I ever tell you about the three people who walked into a bar, a priest, a Jew, and a rabbi, or what, Whatever. Okay? If you do that, then you're not understanding what you're doing as a priest. If you're trying to make it more like fun at Mass, for example, or any other sacrament, like, hey, it's cool, man, I'm a fun priest. I'm not one of those, I don't read what's in the book or anything. I make up my own stuff because that's more fun. That kind of stuff, then you don't understand what a priest is doing. And priests don't understand sometimes what priests are supposed to be doing. That's one of the problems. But if you do understand this teaching of the church that a priest is supposed to be a sign, a window through to Christ in the sacraments, then it makes a little bit more sense to say that it needs to be a man. Because sex is not an arbitrary component of a person. It's not like, oh, well, man or woman, whatever, it doesn't make any difference. Baloney. Makes a lot of difference. Okay, if you're a man or a woman, that makes a lot of difference about a lot of things. Not just physical. There's the emotional components and all of those things that go in. It's not just like, oh, God, why not? I'll make two different kinds. Right? I mean, He had a reason. And it matters. Okay? It must matter then that He made, and it's not just arbitrary differences. Okay? So, let me use this as an example. Think of the Eucharist. The bread is supposed to function as a sign. It also becomes Christ, the church believes, right? But the bread itself is supposed to be a sign of something. The Eucharist is better signified by bread than it is by Doritos or whatever else. Cheetos.
Could you consecrate Cheetos?
You could try, and then you'd be excommunicated. But you could. I'm sure it's been done. No, in all seriousness, there, especially in the 70s when priests did whatever they want, some priests would consecrate, and they would use raisin bread or cinnamon bread or some other bread at that's totally illegal. No. It's the canon law is very clear on what it needs to be. Unleavened bread, blah, blah, blah. Okay?
Can you want to create matzah?
Is matzah unleavened bread? I don't know. I'm not real familiar with it. I know what it is, but I'm not. If it's unleavened bread, yeah. There's been masses before I was serving at a friend's wedding, and they made their own bread, and it was really thick bread. It was like kind of spongy and stuff, but it's unleavened is valid matter. Yeah, it has to be made of wheat, and it has to be unleavened. Okay, those things are what the church has said what Jesus has said is the best sign. Bread, water, all those things have roles to play in their sign value that they're in the Eucharist. Okay? Where do we hear wheat in the gospel? Yeah, grain of wheat falls to the ground. Adding fire like the Holy Spirit. Water, the water of baptism. All those things play a role. If you had to explain where the Cool Ranch flavor, what that signifies, you'd be hard-pressed to say that Cool Ranch has a sign value for Christ. At our non-Catholic church. Otherwise, you're not Catholic anymore. No. Yeah. Okay. So obviously we're making light of it, and that's fine. Just to get the point across. There are better things to be a sign or a sacrament than others. Okay, it wasn't just like God, again, flipped the coin and was like, let's use unleavened hosts. There it is. Okay, and like on the other option was like licorice, or anything else. No. Okay? There's a reason it was bread. And it is bread, and unleavened bread. Okay? In the same way, okay, let's look at this really quickly. Jesus was a Jew with long hair, most likely. Okay? Let's just say for a second that he was. And he wears a certain size of shoe. We'll say size 9 sandals. Okay? Should we find only Jewish men with long hair and size 9 sandals? People literally, I'm not kidding, people make that argument. Say, well, if you're going to say that it matters that you're a man, then it also should matter that you have the same shoe size as Jesus or hairstyle, No, those things are not the same. Those things are not the same as one's sex. Okay? One's sex in the mind of the church is a fundamental core thing. Not random, core. Okay? Hair size, shoe size, all those other things are not the same as one's sex in the mind of the church. Okay? Our church says that our sex is altogether different than those other types of things. That is a major argument that people put. You're always saying, all right, give us the other side. I am right now. Okay, the other side is very adamant that sex is not an important part. Okay, but the church says it is. If you're going to be a person who's standing in the person of Christ and being a sign of Christ at the same time, that sex is not arbitrary. That your sex needs to align itself with Christ. Okay? Now, any questions or comments on that? That's an important thing. Some other objections to the church's teaching really quickly. People say women had big roles in Jesus' group, and of course they did, but only men received the laying on of hands and apostles. Some people will say that the resurrected Jesus is no longer male or female, or he transcends sexuality. False. Okay, his body, it wasn't like they were like, oh, who's that amorphous, asexual person? They still recognized it was still Jesus. Our bodies are still going to be, our sex is still going to be a part of us even when we're resurrected. All right? We have here, really quickly, let's turn to On the back there you have some quotes from different church fathers on women. This isn't something that they just like thought up at some point. That we have AD, you can read through them on your own. A quote from AD 215, one from 225, one from 325, one from 360, one from 377. All of these quotes talking about the church's teaching on women being ordained. Okay? The thing that you want to notice on the bottom there, the questions. Some people will say, well, there were deaconesses in the early church. Okay? And you can read through there. I'll just tell you the answers to these right now because we're running out of time. There were deaconesses in the early church. Okay? They were not ordained. They were not ordained. They basically fulfilled roles that men could not. The main one that they had deaconesses for would be the following. On the Easter Vigil, when you were baptized, you used to be baptized naked. Okay? The women, the deaconesses then would help with the women being baptized. Although the bishop would still do the baptism himself, but they would help with all of that and keeping the curtain up and everything else. Okay? Also then things like if you had to anoint a woman, if a woman was needing anointed or something like that, the deaconesses would help if the help get the woman in a position, in a dressed in a way that would be appropriate. Okay? What we're going to do is we're going to finish now watching this clip. Again, it's British. I don't know what's up with the British and Catholic theology. It was on YouTube. It's nice. It's a few minutes long. Two women arguing about women's ordination. Okay? So we can watch this and just see if we have any thoughts or insights. Okay?
Minutes past 8. Any attempt to ordain women as priests has been described by the Vatican as a grave crime against Catholicism. Its new laws put the issue in the same category as sexual abuse by priests.
Yes, the new measures are likely to be interpreted as a pointed message to Anglicans coming days after the Church of England Synod voted to ordain female bishops.
Therese Kotobash runs a website which campaigns for women priests. Ella Leonard is from Catholic Voices, which advocates the Church's position. Ella, can I just ask you first, welcome to the programme. For a lot of people, they will be mystified by this classification, if you like, of the idea of women priests being ordained in the Catholic Church, putting in the same category as sex abuse by a priest.
I think it's helpful to see where this statement from the Vatican has come from. It's very much a legal document, if you like, canonical law, which is the internal governance of the Catholic Church. And the document, I was reading it again last night, is very much a statement of laws on various issues within the Catholic Church. So it isn't actually at all making a comparison between the sexual abuse issue and the ordination of women. It just happens to be dealt with in the same, if you like, internal legal document.
But Therese, do you accept that explanation? It's just one of a number of things. The fact that they're in the same document, it might be unfortunate, but it's not a direct comparison.
I disagree with what Ella has said. Putting those two items into the same document really makes a mockery of women and children. There's been sexual abuse of children, which is a horrific crime that's been happening in our church. And if the Vatican were taking this seriously, they'd want to laser in and have a special attention focused on just that issue. At the same time, devout women and many men supporting us are working for gender equality in the church. We're being absolutely dismissed. This document is putting these two crimes in the same category. Actually, the crime of attempted ordination of a woman is worse in terms of the way the Vatican views it. Any woman who attempts ordination or someone who assists her is immediately excommunicated, whereas pedophile priests, years to come to justice, shuffling around, hidden in the church or promoted.
So Ellen, actually not on a par, not even comparing them as equivalent crimes. Therese says actually you're making the attempted ordination of women a worse crime.
Well, I think let's get back to the real story here, which is women in their place in the Catholic Church. And throughout history, it's been the teaching of the Catholic Church that only men are priests. And I'm a woman, I'm not a shrinking violet, I assure you, and I'm very, very happy with that position. I think that women within the church are accorded an enormous amount of respect. After all, we believe that the mother of God, the mother of Jesus Christ, was a woman, Mary, who we give a lot of honour to. And women have a huge part to play within the Catholic Church, but that part doesn't extend to being ordained as priests.
And it can't avoid people's attention that just at the time when the Anglican Church, Church of England, is talking about the idea of women bishops, for example, the Catholic Church seems to be going further in the other direction.
Although I can see why there's a connection made between the two events, I don't think the Vatican is doing this to focus it on the Anglican faith communion.
When we talk about the attempted ordination of Catholic women as priests, I mean, how many people are we talking about? How common is this attempted?
There were 7 women ordained, the first 7 women ordained in 2002, and that number around the world has now grown to over 100. And
if it's a crime, if it's considered a crime by the Vatican, how come that still happens?
The Vatican is in a disconnect mode with the people of the faith. People want to talk about this issue. Last month I participated in a vigil in St. Peter's Square where we attempted to present a document to Pope Benedict about women in the past who've been ordained as deacons. No one would receive.
Okay, so a couple of issues here really quickly. She said we attempted to present that to Pope Benedict in the Vatican. Like, they showed up at the Vatican. Like, people do this all the time. They're like, we want to talk to the Pope. What? Like, you can't just show up and be like, I want to talk to the Pope. You know, they're like, oh, see, the church hates us. We showed up, and the Pope said, didn't meet with us. And I'm like, that's just kind of dumb. I'm sorry. Yeah, like, we showed up at 1600 North Pennsylvania, and the president didn't even come out and say, hey. Okay, now, what they're talking about here really quickly is this idea that there are certain sins, we've talked about this before, there are 5 sins in canon law that I cannot, as a priest, forgive a person for in the sacrament of reconciliation. It is called reserved to Rome. If you attack the Pope or threaten to attack the Pope, I cannot forgive you for that. I have to, I cannot give you absolution. Break the seal of confession. So if Kevin Russell is a priest, he comes to me for confession to tell me he's broken the seal of confession, I can't do anything about it. It's reserved to Rome. If I desecrate the Eucharist, I cannot give somebody... What? No, like if you took it, but then you didn't just consume it right away, you put it in your pocket, or you smashed it on the floor, or somebody tried to sell one on eBay a couple of years ago. Right. If you forgive someone you had sex with or have an abortion. In 2001, the church added 2 to that list. 1, abusing a minor. If you abuse a child as a priest, that's one of those things now that you're instantly... And if you attempt to ordain a woman.
What is that forgive someone you had sex with?
If you forgive someone...
Everybody or just for priests?
Just priests. If a priest comes... If you as the priest forgave a person that you had sex with... So you told them, it must have been a problem at some point in the churches. People were doing that or whatever.